When you walk down the 5 layers of descent, your hair loss automatically walks backwards towards regrowth. I am AQBS and this is Back to the Barber. I discovered the 5 layers of descent relatively recently in the process of creating Back to the Barber, which evolved from my personal mission to get my high school hairline back. It, like many of my discoveries, can only happen in sequential order. See, I had already formulated the basic theory of general reversitivity. I know scalp conditions must be met and maintained. I realized DHT was targeting inflammation, and long were the days of questioning, can you really regrow hair? If you still have that question, let me be clear. Follicles of androgenic alopecia are in a comatose telogen state, not dead, but in a stasis state, voluntary or involuntary, depends on how you view it due to the hazardous environment. As I worked through this process, I saw gains, but it began to occur to me that despite doing everything possible to reactivate the mass population follicles feeding the scalp, inhibiting DHT internally and externally using natural substances and using the tools that we all have available, I still couldn't override the Hamilton-Norwood pattern, slow regrowth process where hairs grow reverse of the human growth pattern, not just go in anagen together like we are used to. I was regrowing hair, no doubt about it, a full head of villus hairs that weren't there before, so I knew that the follicles weren't dead. I have dozens and dozens of pictures of the villus hair tips. I knew then that villus hairs are just the unfertilized and underdeveloped terminal hairs unimpregnated by androgens. My hair began to regrow in reverse of the Norwood pattern or forward in a human growth pattern, yet it was still very light, sporadic, and I wasn't activating the mass population of follicles, only the super responders, early adopters, and a small portion of the rest. The aesthetics weren't there, still aren't up to my liking today, but one day soon it will be. Still, that was a good sign. I had gone from totally bald, everything above the Gallia wall shiny, thick, and inflamed, to a flatter, calmer scalp, no bumps, less acne, less tension. It looked better with small patches of villus hair and shadowing, but not the dense regrowth I wanted. See, I fought through this process, experimented and researched endlessly, and eventually 13 notebooks later, I found that the key wasn't addition, but subtraction. Subtraction isn't removing what belongs, but removing what doesn't. That realization led me towards scalp purging and the scalp depot. If you think about it, you intuitively know this. As a young man, the amount of sweat, dirt, grime, and very little sanitation we practiced at that age, and guess what? We had the best hair with the most amount of testosterone and DHT too. As I said before, our DHT wasn't targeting the scalp because the environment did not call it to do so. No stimulants, no blockers, no hair vitamins. And if that's not enough, the older gentlemen that you see with a head full of hair at 60 years old, they don't use those things either. Genetics? I think not. But back to the point, I could not discover the 5 layers of descent until the concept of the master constrictors came forth. 1. The scalp depot, the vertex crown area of toxin storage dumped by the body's organs. 2. The Gallia ridge wall, that ridge separating the top of the head that balls from the sides. And finally 3. The frontal suture annex, the hairline through the suture bone connective area that closes. These 3 are the master constrictors that keep us in a balding state over time, and they could only be revealed after my understanding about the second head overlay, which is what keeps us bald overall, but we'll get to that more later. The 5 layers of descent came to me as I began purging cholesterol, plaque, old lipids, and crunchy crystallization of, I believe, lipids. Getting down to the deeper layers where the root wound existed, where follicles can finally be reactivated en masse. See, you can regrow hair with stimulants, but they mostly affect follicles already active or in a decent anagen state. Those in a telogen or long-term dormancy are hard to bring back because they are bald for a reason. And that reason is almost always microinflammation, infection, or irritation beneath the surface. Make no mistake, the pattern shows you the weaker areas of the scalp. What you lose first, you gain last. This is because hair grows in the path of the least resistance. Like water running down a hill, if it runs long enough, it would erode the soil underneath. Thus, future water will use that same path of running as it would have the least amount of resistance. Hair grows the same way: crown, frontal, hard gainers, first to go. The 5-layer descent realization came after I had passed the second head. Once that stage was reached, new changes appeared. The scalp flattening around the back and the edges, but the crown fought the hardest and stayed plaqued over longer. Eventually, I could place my fingers on the sides and push up the galea skin again. Before, I just couldn't. Most severely bald men with shiny, tight scalps can't either. That tension is often mistaken as the cause of hair loss, but it's actually an effect of deeper mechanical physical changes. Fibrosis locks the scalp muscles together, altering the terrain. Fibrosis hardens. Follicles drown in plaque, nerves go offline, circulation fails, the whole entire environment collapses. And this happens in an order that I call the path. They are the doorways or pathways of how hair loss or its sequential degradation. The path or doorways are trigger, immune response, hormonal imbalance, vasodilation, circulation, mechanical and physical changes. The immune response is marked by acne, itching, inflammation, redness, tenderness, and excessive sebum oil. Then comes hormonal imbalance. Androgens dominate and omega traits recede, scalp fat thins, circulation issues, it's like sclerosis, follow, not as causes, but as consequences. The final stage is mechanical, fibrosis, tension, and the deformation of the scalp. So in short, we are having to walk the path backwards, but each sublayer of the balding scalp has unique challenges that we have to face. Now for a moment, imagine a small figure standing on your scalp with a shovel who must dig through the 5 layers to reach the root wound to restore your follicles back to factory setting. Standing there, the first thing he'll see is he's standing on seemingly healthy looking skin, which will be very confusing to him. Why am I attempting to break through healthy skin, he might say. This is also why many start with stimulants or DHT inhibiting or even nutrients. The outer layer skin looks good besides the greasy look, especially as years go by, but it's deception. 1. The camouflage layer. This layer deceives most people. It's the healthy bald look. Think of a clean shaven head with oil applied. It looks decent because the body has covered the damaged zone. The immune response has gone dormant. That smooth, calm surface is actually a quarantine, a mask over deep inflammation. This layer is why balding looks like a final form or normal. It hides the war zone underneath it. To progress, you must irritate this layer with derma rolling, purging acids, and other means. As you do, acne, dandruff, and redness return, signs that the immune system is reawakening. It looks ugly, but it's necessary. Many of you saw the pictures of plaque erupting from my scalp. What you can't see up close is the acne, or the feel overall of soreness and irritation I've lived with for over 1.5 years. Once it gets past the fake healthy scalp, he would dig his shovel in, only for an oily-like substance to erupt, if not a butter-like substance. He's hit the second head. 2. The second head. Once the top layer is broken, things look worse before they look better. The second head appears thick skin on the top and trapped plaque, DHT, fluids, toxins, and lipids underneath. It may cover the entire scalp in severe hair loss, but for many of you, it will be behind the suture line. This is where the glossy, oily look comes from. This is how the follicles get drowned and starve. And truthfully, this is why there is no autopilot hair regrowth for the majority of men with male pattern balding. Besides the extras in the scalp, such as cholesterol, the toxins, renegade proteins, bacteria, and more than likely unprocessed foods are stored there. Through purging, derma rolling, percussion gun, balayantron, and exfoliation with a topical solvent, it begins to peel away like butter. Digging further, the little man would hit a hard spot. He say aloud perhaps, okay, this is not the skull. I am not that deep. And as he investigates, he'll find that he's hit a layer that seems to be scaly or scab-like, the undercarriage. 3. The fibrotic undercarriage. Beneath the second head lies the fibrotic layer, a hard, scaly, shell-like healed scar tissue. It's not thick, but it's extremely flaky. It puts you in the mind of that knee scrape after it's scabbed over. The skin is hard to the touch, not in the frontal hairline way, but literally the fibrotic layer that is exposed is the scar tissue covering the wound. Thus, it's the most hardened, unnatural skin. Now, this I was not prepared for, to be honest. I had no idea that once I purged, sawed off skin layers, dug out plaque, and released fluids, that the next layer was the true fibrotic tissue. Not thick, not hardened, scarred. Who knew? But the great thing is, like a scab, it can be removed and it's not as hard as plaque exposure. Warning on this: up until this time, I would only see specks of blood during derma rolling 1.5 sessions, which create small puncture wounds that close rapidly. But once you get to the fibrotic undercarriage, you are close to the wound and touching that real lower layer of the scalp. This means that everything you do now has to be softer, or you will see scratches, or you will re-wound the surface, or in my case, using an acid too hard and seeing, oh wow, I see beneath the dermis now. Once you get to the fibrotic undercarriage, be careful. I hate to admit it, but it seems that these are the skin layers or cells that used to be the top layer of skin before the scalp wore. Imagine that. This layer was our top layer that got covered and quarantined. At least that is my suspicion. Regardless, it's the final barrier covering the wound. Removing it may take 4 to 6 weeks or longer. It's not evenly spread throughout the scalp. It may be deeper in the scalp depot, but not as far as down in the frontal. Finally getting through the more liquid toxic second head, then the crusted fibrotic layer, the little man with the shovel hits the spot and you let out a yelp. Everything else you did not really feel, but now he seems to have hit a sensitive spot, a layer that doesn't seem to be a past issue, but one that is still actively being made. This is the root wound lesion. 4. The root wound lesion. Beneath the fibrotic shell lies the root wound, the true source. This chronic wound triggers the entire DHT inflammation plaque cycle. Until this wound is healed, follicles cannot reawaken on a mass scale. Every other effort is surface work. There are many aspects about the way that I view hair loss differently versus mainstream or most others, and this is one of those things. We know the scalp depot is the dumping ground for waste and toxins the body can't get rid of, and it eventually clogs the entire environment and causes inflammation. However, you can say that the root wound itself is a side effect of the second head. The ironic part about this layer is it wasn't always there. It didn't happen because of an injury or because of DHT or even normal scalp pathogens or bacteria. This would have developed over time as the body collected its secondhand contaminants. I have found that cholesterol or plaque covers wounds, but over time, if they sit long enough, they themselves create even more inflammation that would turn healthy skin into inflamed, irritated, and infected skin. Thus, the root layer isn't the root of hair loss, but it's the anchor that holds us to what happened years ago, the trigger into place. So even when we diet, exercise, and do everything we possibly can to regrow hair, this hidden root lesion fights against hair growth every step of the way. DHT has been like a bee swarming around our heads, but we were unaware it was attracted to the scent of the flowers. What is the flowers? The wound. Once this layer is exposed, the true healing can happen. Because it is no longer covered Anti-inflammatory meds can be applied, and anti-pathogenic creams. The medicated shampoos will actually work now. The yeast, bacteria, and pathogens can be targeted. The biofilms can be removed. Infection and irritation are now exposed and open. Thus, you can heal the actual real scalp. Sadly, the camouflage layer, the second head, and the fibrotic layer can't really even be called real scalp layers. If it was, you cannot really remove it in the function that we do. But once you get to this layer, it acts just like the rest of your healthy body skin, sensitive to poking, scraping, and injury. And that's actually a good thing, because finally you are at least dealing with the real scalp layer, although it is in a bad condition. This leads our little man with the shovel to his final layer, which is not a layer at all. But once the root wound lesion is no longer infected, inflamed, and irritated, and covered with the fibrotic tissue and the second head, his next job is not to shovel further, but to massage growth. 5. The neurovascular silence layer. The final layer involves neurogenesis and angiogenesis, the restoration of nerves and blood vessels. Once the wound heals, and ironically it doesn't take very long, 2 or 3 weeks, attention shifts from DHT suppression, plaque purging, to rebuilding circulation and nerve flow. We call the follicles dead, but this telogen state is partly caused by the vessels and the nerves being disconnected and offline. The final layer of descent is not for the little man to dig further and to remove anything, but to start plugging things back up. The body will automatically turn our follicles back on as the environment is getting back to the pre-balding conditions, but it may take a while. This is where 2 distinct functions in hair loss are used, but we have been using them inefficiently: red light therapy and microcurrent devices. Many of you asked about red light therapy, and many swear by it, and I see why, but I can tell you, no severe balding man has and will say they work, and I understand why. A red light helmet has never made a severe man grow hair, but it can help newly activated follicles go into anagen once conditions in the scalp are improved. Thus, red light therapy is perfect once you get to this 5th layer of descent. The same with the microcurrent device. Yes, the pulses help, but not as much with the overlays. Yes, getting down to the root wound and healing it would increase the efficacy of both the red light devices and microcurrent devices that we use. They work. The science is sound. Our applications and timing were off. Another bonus is, once the root lesion is healed, all your topicals act like an omega scalp. Absolutely beautiful. In conclusion, the wound is the cause. DHT is the symptom. The 5 layers, the camouflage, the second head, fibrotic undercarriage, root wound, and neurovascular science must all be transversed in sequence. Each layer removed exposes the next, and with each stage, the body relearns how to heal the scalp environment. Only when you reach the root wound and regenerate its neurovascular network can hair return to its omega restored state. Hair loss undetectable doesn't seem like fantasy anymore, does it? Like, subscribe, comment, as iron sharpens iron, and we only have each other. And remember, if I can do it, you all can do it too. Let's get you back to the barber.